Good morning, everybody. Let's enjoy Sunday breakfast together with the whole family. What a happy place to be. It is a happy place as long as we do not overthink where the food on our plates actually comes from. The avocado, for example, our new green gold. It is being considered as a world-famous superfood. One avocado requiring 2 full bathtubs of water to grow leads us to the question how super it really is. Animal products, a mandatory part at the breakfast table. Besides questionable husbandry systems, keeping animals for our food produces an enormous amount of greenhouse gases and creates environmental problems such as water pollution or deforestation. Palm oil, 58 million metric tons produced every year. It is a major driver of deforestation. 45% of the area covered by new plantations is on formerly forested land. Coffee. Rising temperatures will reduce the area suitable for growing coffee by up to 50% by 2050. New places will have to be found, but where? And then there is food wastage. 17% of the total global food production is being thrown away. 28% of the world's agricultural area is used every single year to produce food that will just be dumped into a bin. We choose what we put on our table. Just an everyday breakfast.
What we eat, and to be honest, I think we do not always eat the way we should, and that is not healthy for us, but as we have seen, it's not healthy for our planet as well. In these next 40 minutes, we want to talk a little bit about food, but also how the food production affects the environment. And I'm really happy to have some wonderful guests with me who's going to share very interesting stories and also solutions. So I think we just start directly with the first one, Claire Hill. You are the farmer and the regenerative agriculture director at FAI Farms. Now we have seen in the film that the food production really affects the environment in a very negative way. Can you tell us how are you contributing with your work so maybe that things are getting better in the future?
Yes. Oh, hello. Thank you. Hi. Regenerative agriculture, yeah. Why do we do it? I think we do it because of systems like this, and we need a different solution. But just for those that don't know, regenerative agriculture in its simplest terms is a food production system that puts more back than it takes out. We often talk about sustainable food, but we know, all of us here today, that we've taken everything a little bit too far. We haven't achieved sustainability, we're not sustaining, and we need to start regenerating, we need to start putting back what we've taken out. And so, yeah, we've been exploring food systems that do exactly that, specifically for me on ruminant agriculture with cattle, which can sometimes be a dirty word in a room like this. But ultimately, cattle or any animal are part of our environment. The microbes in our guts are the same as the microbes in a cow's gut, is the same as the microbes in the soil. And it's all part of one ecosystem. And that's key. We've kind of extracted ourselves from that ecosystem in the way that we produce our food. So regenerative agriculture is about understanding how an ecosystem works, and on the previous points, increasing our eco-literacy as farmers so that we understand the ecosystem around us and how to farm in the best way, to capture nature. Nature is an amazing beast. Nowhere produces more biomass per square metre than somewhere like the Amazon. No human-intervened farming system can produce more food. Now, we can't exactly eat everything that is produced in that way, but how do we capture that knowledge and use it and mimic that in a natural and kind of gentle way. Yeah.
It's super interesting. We see that we waste a lot of food. And now we already have a question for all of you, because Matt explained menti.com to you earlier, and now we want to ask you one more question. That is, how many tons of food are wasted in Austrian households each year? You can see we have here, oh, people are already guessing. That's amazing. You can all take out your phones. We have 100,000, 250,000 or 500,000 tons. So we're not talking about kilograms, but about tons. And when I was reading these three numbers, I couldn't decide because I thought all the answers would be much lower. But I think the answer will be very shocking anyway. But to give you some time to answer that question, I think we just continue with our next guest, Jürgen Czernohorski. You are the Executive City Councillor for Climate from the city of Vienna. That means you are an important politician and you have to make important decisions that affect people every day. We are facing very challenging times right now. We have a war, we have the climate crisis, and that leads to higher prices. People are afraid of higher prices also for food, but they're already suffering. How can we still convince the people to buy more responsible, more climate-friendly? And maybe you can tell us how a big city like Vienna can be part of the solution and not part of the problem.
Yeah, you already mentioned the high prices, and therefore I think the first question is not about convincing the people to buy responsibly, but enabling them. Let's be honest, it's a fact that so many people can't afford climate-friendly goods. We have to link closely every measure, every single climate protection measure to a contribution to social cohesion and social justice. And everything we do has to be enabling people to afford the day-to-day life, and this day-to-day life has to be climate-friendly. So we have to think of a new way of living together. We have to think of empowering communities, empowering solidarity, and empowering regionality. And this is something we're working on in Vienna. Vienna, I don't know if everybody knows, Vienna is a city with a very high percentage of farmlands, for example. 14% of the city surface, Vienna is a capital city, is covered by farms. So we try to boost organic farming. We try to support our farmers, and we do it by example, because Vienna is also a farmer. The city of Vienna owns 2,000 hectares of farmland. And the city of Vienna is one of the biggest organic food producers. So we make flour and oils and whatever. But beside that, we need to talk to the people. We have to work on an approach that tells the people we are in this together. And that's why we worked on the climate teams, which is basically the climate council on the city level. And we worked for ideas, from the ideas to the solution, together with the people, with the participatory budget. And our climate tour is on the way. Maybe you've seen it out there. There are bicycles, e-bikes, with different topics. And one is food, regional food, for example. But there's also an energy bike and a water bike and whatever. So we try to not only talk to the people in our city, but talk with them in order to work on a totally new way of living together in a city that is proud to be the world's #1 city when it comes to livability. And we want to be the world's livable city in 20 years to come, but that means that we have to change quite everything.
You said the city of Vienna is producing food as well in a very big scale. Can you produce it to a low price, or you are kind of have the same prices like the market has?
Yeah, definitely we try to do it affordable. We try also to influence the market, which is very Viennese. We try to do it 100 years now, for example, when it comes to social housing. And that is something we also want to do when it comes to agriculture. We want to support our farmers. We have subsidies for organic farming. We have subsidies for the change of a normal farm system into an organic farming system. And as we are a farmer as well, we can try out new ways of combining organic food production and affordability.
That's amazing. Good luck. Thank you very much. I think we just look at the result of our menti.com. And I see you all guessed very good. I wouldn't have known that. Did you know? It's 500,000 tons of food wasted each year. I mean, I cannot even imagine that number.
Unfortunately, we know, and that is why it's not only climate protection that is one of our biggest goals in our city climate program, but also working together on getting a zero waste city. And food waste is a very big topic, so it's a big thing. We have to work on it, even or above all under the symbol of social climate protection policy.
Yeah. I think when we read numbers like that, we really have to keep in mind another number I learned from UNICEF. It's that on our world each year, 13 million children under the age of 5 years old are still malnourished, and I think that is such a huge number, and we have to find a solution for that big disbalance very, very soon. But yeah, this is not the only problem we have to find a solution for, because food is not only wasted in households, but it's also wasting during production. We have seen in the video in the beginning, but food production is also a very big business. So we have to think about how big companies try to help saving the climate and what they do against climate change. And maybe, here. Maria Lettini, you can help us answering that. You are the executive director at FAIR. Maybe you can tell us how your organization is involved in all this and what FAIR is doing, and maybe also teach us what role big money plays in that context.
Well, thank you very much for this opportunity to speak to all of you. I've been really encouraged by everything I've heard today, particularly addressing the energy sector, and it's a real privilege to be here today with this panel to talk about food. We're here to talk about food because it's a huge contributor, not only through food waste. I work for the FAIR Initiative. It's an institutional investor network. We have members whose assets total over $65 trillion. That's larger than the GDP of most countries. We want to galvanize institutional investors because they're investing the capital of your pensions. And to do that, their primary goal is to ensure that they're investing for increasing returns, but even more so to make sure they're not doing damage to people and planet. And that's become really important. In order to do that, we need to focus on what are the financially material risks and opportunities in the food system. We focus on intensive animal agriculture, the consumption of food today, and it touches on a number of the things we've been talking about here so far. But the reason why capital is so important, and the reason why we want to bring together institutional investors, is because they have the opportunity to have companies gain access to capital or deny them access to capital. And so really understanding the significant risks and opportunities, particularly around climate issues, is important because it means they make choices for their investment portfolios. When we think about food, and particularly agriculture and animal agriculture, in the context of climate, we've touched on it in previous panels, but over 30% of global GHG emissions come from agriculture. It's the #1 cause of Amazon deforestation, which we just touched on there. It's the #1 user of fresh water on the planet. It's the #1 user of our critically important antibiotics today, simply because of the inherent nature of how we're producing animals for food. It actually takes 60% of the world's maize and 20% of the world's wheat goes to livestock. So just inherent in those numbers, you can see why this may be a risk. And linking it back to what we've talked previously about waste and pollution, the amount of manure produced by livestock today is equivalent to at least double that of the human population. So we touched on human health outcomes for people living near polluted areas or around really congested areas of the South Circular in London. That also happens for communities living around intensive livestock production facilities. And all of that comes as a huge risk to investment portfolios. We want to understand what regulation, legislation, what's happening with EU taxonomy that might be coming down the pipeline, and that will help a lot of the large global food manufacturers, retailers, animal protein producers understand how they may need to mitigate climate-related risks and adapt to what's coming down the pipeline. So we see the food system as not only contributing to climate, environmental, and social risks, but being a huge part of the solution. So investors increasingly want to be part of this conversation and want to make sure that they're having these dialogues with the global food sector in order to assess risk and opportunity.
Thank you very much for that very interesting, but I think also very shocking numbers. Stefan Frank, you are a climate scientist. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about how climate change and our dietary choices are connected, and also what would you recommend to people, to policymakers, to companies, but also to individuals with regard to that?
Yeah. First of all, also thanks a lot for the invitation and the pleasure to be here. We heard it just before. I mean, agriculture and the food system in general is a big contributor to climate change, but also in terms of emissions. We heard it, 1/3 of global emissions. And historically, we kind of increased the efficiency of the system, but still emissions continued to increase. And also they are projected to continue for a while due to sustained population and GDP growth. So it's really utmost important to kind of cut down emissions now in order to kind of be consistent with the 1.5 degree target. The good news is, though, that there's plenty of kind of levers to achieve this in the sector. So there are kind of practices, technologies available even today that help significantly cut down emissions or kind of enhance things. So first, like I would consider it a very high priority, is to reduce emissions associated to land use changes driven by agricultural, cropland, grassland expansion, for example. Then as well, cutting down emissions associated to, let's say, ruminant production and rice production, methane emissions from those sectors. And this can be done by the deployment, large-scale deployment of certain technologies, let's say anaerobic digesters, improved feed conversion efficiencies, feed supplements. But then the second point is also kind of restoring the carbon sinks that we used to have in agriculture systems, like in the soils, in the biomass, by kind of improved management practices, also like agroforestry, silvopasture systems, or cover cropping, residue management systems. We are able to kind of put the soil back from the carbon back from the atmosphere into the soils, which is not only beneficial for climate change mitigation, but also for soil health, increased resilience to climate change impacts, but also then beneficial for example, food security issues. So these win-win or no regret options need to be deployed large scale in order to not only tackle climate change, but also a broad number of sustainable development goals. And let's say moving from the supply side to the demand side, we heard it in the video, food waste is a big issue. So 25-30% of the food is wasted along the supply chain, not even coming to the, let's say, stomach. So this is one big lever, but at the same time also reducing in over-consuming countries the calorie intake from animals, substituting it with plant-based proteins, for example. So this is also another big potential for emission reductions, not only again for the climate, but also for our own health and also for example, biodiversity conservation.
Thank you very much. We are facing a climate crisis, a war in the Ukraine, also higher prices. All these issues affect the global food production, but they also affect that people get enough to eat. Maria Lettini, can you tell us how will markets react to all of these issues, and what would be your advice for the decision makers in these challenging times?
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I think we're all living at my own food basket at home, and I'm in a developed country, has increased twice. It increased twofold, right? And we can only imagine what's happening with the developing countries. And so, my suggestion to policymakers is, I know this is it's a contentious issue. It needs a collaborative approach. It needs an approach that considers not only developed countries, but developing countries, and even within our developed countries. I mean, I was speaking to Claire earlier. I mean, she's at the forefront of a lot of the innovation that we really need to encourage and incentivize farmers to explore. We're in a privileged position to be able to do that. And I would encourage policymakers to have these tough decisions. We absolutely know that we will not stay within 1.5 degrees if we don't address the emissions from agriculture. It includes feed, it includes animals. We need the data. Thanks to Stefan, we have quite a bit of it. We need a roadmap like we've had with energy. And we need to consider the farmers, who are some of the smartest people in the room. And in many cases, my personal opinion is that they've been forced down a path which they can't actually continue to go down. They need the support from subsidies, moving away from a focus on just yields. They need to be able to incentivize to explore other innovation, precision agriculture, regenerative agriculture. And we also need to look at other innovations and the power of the consumer. You mentioned the consumer before, and obviously really great leadership efforts from Vienna. Procurement is a big way we can begin change. We can start leading by example. But consumers are showing us that they're moving towards more flexitarian diets. They're interested in understanding better about the provenance of their food, of eating and food that is produced closer to home. They understand the contribution that their food is making to climate. So I would suggest incentivizing the move towards exploring more plant-based diets, being open to cultivated meat, alternative proteins, and making sure that we're really reconsidering which countries have the competitive advantage to be producing which products and moving those closer to home and bringing the farmers along with us.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Hill, what do you think? What will happen in this challenging time, and how will your work maybe be affected as well?
Yeah, it's a good point. I think there's one key phrase here that I like to use a lot, which is, it's not the cow, it's the how. It's not necessarily that animal agriculture per se is the problem, it's how it's done. It's not cows that are the problem. We've had ruminants roaming this earth, kind of long before we did. But it's the way in which we manage them now. We've intensified them, we've brought them indoors, and we now feed them something that they weren't designed to digest. So we now feed them, in some countries, a mainly grain-based diet, whereas they are designed to eat grass and plants and trees and everything else. So how will our work be affected? I think our work is just becoming more and more necessary as all of these pressures that we're facing, climate change, biodiversity loss, nitrogen cycling. I mean, we're here to talk about climate, which of course is all-encompassing. And if you look at Johan Rockstrom's work on the planetary boundaries, we think we're scared about climate. We passed the biodiversity planetary boundary long ago, and nitrogen as well. And agriculture has a responsibility as a big user of nitrogen fertilizer in its system to do something about that. But regenerative agriculture or an agriculture systems include, when we talk about regenerative, we're including silvopasture, so planting more trees in amongst our systems, or just looking for those that mimic nature are kind of, it's almost like every challenge leads back to that as a solution when it comes to food production. So if it's about more volatility at the moment, farmers can't get hold of feed, they can't get hold of fertilizer because of the problems that are happening. Okay, well, why don't you work out how you can farm without those things, and then you won't need to rely on them in the future. Also around the people side of things. Within agriculture, we have very high rates of depression, high rates of suicide, high rates of accidents because people are working really long hours and don't have the money to invest in new equipment and things. So it's this kind of whole piece that is so important to look for a system that works in a different way. So what we're trying to do in the main with regenerative agriculture is look for a more circular system. We all know more circular systems are good, but within that one farm, to not be so reliant on inputs. So to bring diversity to our farm with cattle followed by grazing sheep, followed by grazing chickens. We're reducing our spread there straight away by having 3 different products. That's risk reduction, working on it at a totally different scale than our one individual farm. We're understanding how to manage our grasslands better so that we're getting all of our productivity from there. We're not having to bring in feed and fertilizer from elsewhere. Our stress levels, we often blame the weather as farmers. It's too rainy, too windy, too cold, too hot, too blah, everything else. Now, those things do happen, but they're our new norm. That's our new reality. We've already done too much now to go back on that. And what we're trying to do now is adapt and not have to face even worse consequences. In order to do that, we need to, for example, be able to hold on to more rainfall. We need to improve our soil health so that for every single drop of rain that does land on that ground, it's absorbed and it's held within the soil to take us through the dry months. You know, we're seeing in Europe now, and even in the UK, in that green and pleasant land, we're having drought summers. We're having to feed out our winter feed that we've meant to keep for the winter. We have to feed it in the summer because we're not able to grow anything. So we need to understand how to manage our grazing better, and that there are solutions to do that, but they take a different way of thinking and they take a different paradigm way of how maybe systems are currently set up. Often, a lot of the solutions that are being thrown at us as farmers right now are about tweaks to the system. Use this piece of tech, feed this sort of methane inhibitor, and that will help. So all of those things are really important for kind of small tweaks on the system, but we also need a fundamental system shift to think about the way in which we produce our food and to work in systems that mimic nature rather than trying to fight it. And I'll give you my very basic level of example of what we mean when we talk about fighting nature. A couple, actually. One is, my first one is starting to talk about soil health with farmers and why it's so important. And we talk about soil smell. So you can get really down and dirty and actually smell soil, and you can tell because we're all part of nature, really. So there's something in you that says, that smells good, like compost, or, ooh, that smells a bit kind of pungent and a bit sulfury. And I had a Danish farmer say to me, well, can't I just open the tractor door while I'm ploughing and I'll just smell what's happening from there? And it's kind of like that missing link, that sort of actually just doing it from a machine. You're not down and really understanding it. And another one would be, and that's kind of because with his plough, he's trying to fight what nature wants to do with the soil and try to kind of manipulate it in their own way. And another one would be with weeds. We get a lot of, everybody has weeds in your gardens at home, but also on farms. And as farmers, we just spend our life trying to fight weeds, and we do it with chemicals in conventional agriculture, and we do it with machines in organic agriculture. But within a regenerative system, we look at a weed and we don't say, I don't want that there. We say, why do we have that? What is it showing us? And more often than not, there's a reason. So it might be a thistle, for example, has a very deep taproot. When you pull up grass, you get roots this long. When you pull up thistles, you get roots this long. And that's nature's way of breaking up the soil. So if we just let that do its job for a few years, eventually the soil will be broken up and the thistles will go away. And we have not had to spend any money, any time, or any fossil fuel in trying to kill that weed. So there are actually some simple solutions. It's not the only solution to what we need to do, but regenerative agriculture is definitely part of it, and we need to start thinking about how we shift our minds to work with nature rather than against it.
I love the passion you're talking about that topics. It's amazing. Thank you for that insights. Mr. Frank, your research is about climate mitigation measures and food security. You have just published a study on that topic. Maybe you can tell us more about food security in the light of climate change.
Yeah, thanks. I think there are two sides related to it. So one is, of course, the impact of climate change on food security, and the other one, kind of potential implications of land-based mitigation options on also as well on food security or potential effects, let's say. So obviously, the first one, climate or the food system or agriculture is affected significantly by climate change through changing precipitation or patterns, extreme events, droughts, other disturbances. So even these days, pastoral systems around the world are affected by droughts, and these systems sustain the livelihood of millions of people. So there's a clear link, and of course we have to increase the resilience to climate change in order to, let's say, mitigate adverse effects on food security. At the same time, we have to cut down emissions, and some of the, let's say, land-based mitigation options that are at our hands may have also kind of implications for food security, because they are land demanding, they increase competition for fertile land. So when designing a kind of land-based mitigation policy, one has to consider this. And one example would be currently, which is quite debated, is the large-scale deployment of bioenergy plantations for fossil fuel substitution then in the energy system. So it's let's say, a good technology from a climate perspective. It reduces emissions. At the same time, it competes for land. And so in order to avoid the knock-on effects on the agricultural markets, food prices, undernourishment, One has, when kind of taking the decision and thinking that, okay, this technology or practice should be in the portfolio that we want to deploy, one has to kind of put safeguards in place. So either, for example, bioenergy plantations should only be established on marginal lands that are depleted and kind of can be restored with this practice, or also kind of deploy accompanying measures. Like one measure could be that we reduce the intake of, let's say, land-intensive commodities or beef, meat, and then free up some land that can be then used for some of these mitigation options. But I think also what Claire said before on the kind of systems perspective, this is a very, very key or kind of very important topic also at the, let's say, global scale, because you're doing it at the farm scale, and also in our research we try to kind of have this integrated view across systems, not only tackling, let's say, climate change, but also at the same time trying to address food security issues, biodiversity issues, and all the kind of challenges or issues that we currently have in the systems. So in order to kind of move forward and provide a, let's say, a sustainable solution across multiple issues, because that's also then what kind of people are willing to buy into. It's not they don't want, well, of course they want to fight climate change, but if you can link it to different other issues and can address them at the same time, of course there's a much higher chance that farmers are willing to adopt a certain practice.
Thank you very much. I think that's a very important topic your research is about, because food security is a big thing right now. Everyone is afraid of higher costs, so thank you for doing all the research. Mr. Czernohorski, just a few weeks ago, the city of Vienna decided to be climate neutral in 2040. That is an amazing goal, but we have very challenging times right now. Can you tell us what is your plan to achieve that goal? And we would be very happy to hear some concrete actions and examples.
Yeah, I mean, being climate neutral by 2040 is our Man to the Moon project in Vienna, and it is a huge challenge in every sector, and it is a challenge to transform our city in pretty much every way, and therefore we have to have a plan. And I'm very glad to say that in the last month we quite literally came up with a plan. It's called Klimafahrplan, which roughly translates to climate guide. I'm trying to avoid climate roadmap because it's a very fossil word. And this climate guide, this Klimafahrplan, consists of measures, big ones and small ones, over 100 measures in every sector, from mobility to the building sector to the energy supply of the city. The energy supply is probably one of the biggest challenges, because in Vienna there are 500,000 gas boilers in households, and we have to get rid of that by using heat pumps, by using geothermal energy, by using district heating, and it is a real challenge to get it done in only 18 years, but therefore we're already working on that with concrete buildings. We make a sprint in the next years to show that it's possible. But as it's not only about climate protection, because climate change is already happening, this plan is also about climate adaptation in order to be a city that is livable not only for the well-off, to be a city where you can sleep at night if you don't have, I don't know, a private swimming pool or whatever. And it's also a plan of saving biodiversity and circular economy. And that's perfectly relating to the topic of this discussion, because we want to be a city of short distances. Therefore, we are investing in public transport. We want to be a city of localization. Therefore, we invest in local agriculture. And we want to be a city of positive visions. This plan is not a plan of sacrifices. It's a vision of a better way of living together in a more localized and in a climate-friendly way. It's a good vision of a good life for everybody in our city, and that's how we want to get to make larger majorities for the things we are working upon. And as you asked whether cities can be part of the solution, it is I'm deeply convinced that cities are the solution, linked with energy-efficient buildings, with getting rid of fossil fuels and turning into renewable energies. Urban lifestyle is the way of living together in the future, and urban lifestyle is the way to tackle climate change. I'm deeply convinced of that. So the solution lies within the cities.
That's amazing. Good luck with your goals. We all hope you're going to achieve it. To close our panel, I would have one last question to every one of you to answer maybe in 1 or 2 sentences, because we heard a lot today about food production, about food waste, consumption. What advice would you give to all the people listening to us? What can they do to help the climate, depending on food? You want to start?
Well, everybody's heard of meatless Mondays. If you can integrate one day out of the week where you remove meat and dairy, you will make everyone doing that will make a significant contribution to lowering the emissions. I encourage everyone to consider the food they eat and make choices along those lines.
Thank you.
Right now we're building the biggest heat pump in Europe. Not everybody can build a heat pump every day, but you can decide to what you eat the next meal you take. And I strongly suggest that the next meat you eat is some regional vegetable food. It is a big contribution that everybody can do.
Thank you. Claire?
Watch Kiss the Ground on Netflix. I think that's what I'd say. It's a great movie, all about regenerative agriculture, explains it fantastically. So yeah, if everyone watches Kiss the Ground on Netflix, then I think that'll be a success.
Thank you. I'm going to watch it tomorrow. Thanks for the tip. Mr. Frank?
I think we had a lot of things before. So indeed, maybe let's say it's not just about incremental changes, but it's really a fundamental change that is needed. And so it's not only about the diets. So when thinking about the diets, I think maybe also about the next holiday or next transportation that you are going to need to kind of change it on a bigger scale and not just reducing meat a bit.
Thank you very much. Thank you to all of you for that super interesting insights. I hope we could inspire and motivate all of you to maybe think twice in the future what you eat and what you hopefully don't waste anymore. And you all can be part of the solution with every choice you make every day. So thank you very much for the inspiration. Matt, are you still here? Did
Barbara,
you listen?
I am still here, and thank you. By the way, thank you to this panel. I get it. I feel like they're sending me a subtle message here. I got to stop eating meat. All right, I hear you guys. Thank you so much.
But we ate vegan yesterday, so it was
did?
a first start, and you really liked it, right?
And I had fish for lunch today, so I feel like we're already taking it to heart. And I think right now we're going to get to enjoy another performance by our band, the global band Ruskaya. And I actually got a text. Arnold Schwarzenegger texted me. He's been watching the whole show. And he said if he doesn't get one of these outfits, he's going to consider it a failure. He loved it. Loved those pants right there, Georgi. Are you guys ready? Are you ready? Then let's hear again from Ruskaya.
We stand with an army of open arms. Love is all we need. A kiss has the power of 1,000 guns. Love is all we need. Fighting a battle that can be lost. Evil won't succeed. If you feel it, brother, then join with us. And love will take the for the love revolution. We gonna change the world with the love revolution. We see times are changing, we change them back. Love is all we need. There's only one message we got to spread. Love is all we need. Be fighting a battle that can be lost. We will not receive, no, no, no. If you feel the power, then join with us. And love will take the lead. It's time for the love revolution. We're gonna change the world with the love revolution. Stand up and fight the hate. Yes, it's time for the love revolution. We're gonna change the world with the love revolution. Stand up, it's not too late. Yeah. Yo, ladies and gentlemen, we're gonna start with the love revolution right here, right now. Are you ready? All we got to do is to put a hand to your neighbor's shoulder, like this. Yeah, this all we need. Some seconds of having touch with each other, and this is already good love. It's a good vibe, it's a good world, it's a good for all us. Yeah, it's time for the love revolution. We're gonna change the world with the love revolution. Are you ready to sing together with us? 1, 2, 3. It's time for the love revolution. We're gonna change the world, everybody, with the love revolution. Stand up and fight the hate. Yes, it's time, say, for the love revolution. We're gonna